How long does it take to make video games? A year? 2? 3? Maybe even 5? To a decade? Well, I made one in 5 days. So, I participated in the JameGam Game Jam, which is a game jam where people have 5 days to make a game around a theme and a special object. But there was an issue. Even as the game jam had started, it would take about 30 more minutes before a theme and special object were to be announced, which in a game jam could be the situation between getting a working game and not getting any game in at all. Anyway, this time it was the theme of 2 worlds and the special object of a cake. I pretty quickly had an idea that I would make a game where you would go between 2 points in time and fight enemies. I didn't have a big idea of what to do, and I didn't quite know what to do with the cake, apart from I might just use it as the enemies or be one of the worlds. So I hopped into Unity and started getting to work. The first day I didn't get much done, but to be fair, it did start at 6 o'clock on the previous day, so I didn't have much time. What did I do on the second day to get my game jam working? Well, I went ice skating, and then bowling, and then sat in a park until past lunchtime before I would head home and continue working on the game. At this point, I drew a character, animated some legs, and I got some code from some of my previous projects of gun scripts and some other stuff, and just put it all together to make something work. After that, I built a little world using some art I drew, and started working on a transition effect. At this stage, I have to say it didn't look the greatest, and I deliberately used that sprite because it looked silly, and I will change it, just not yet. So, with the transition done, I could build the mouldy world and the normal living cake world. I made some assets for the worlds and painted them using the Unity tile map system, and it turned out... well, it turned out, at least. So, now I had 2 worlds, and then after time the worlds would switch between the 2, and it was working. On the next day I implemented an enemy. I copied some A-star pathfinding code, placed it into my project, and I made the suit who walks towards the player and explodes. So I started messing around with enemy spawning, and it didn't exactly work how I wanted, mainly because I'd used timesing rather than addition, and made some spawning too wide. To fix the spawning on screen, I first tried using bounds, which didn't work, and then I tried using a circle. And then I had the wrong type of greater than or less than, which ended up meaning they would exclusively spawn on screen. Yeah, it didn't. But eventually I managed to get it to work properly, and yeah. I implemented the lollipop sprites and made them into a shooting enemy, and made a circle, like the top of the lollipop, which worked. So, I had the game, and it was lacking a really key feature. I only had a bit over 1 day to make it, and this was a weapon upgrade system. Now, I had no infrastructure to make this, no saving data implemented, none of that. And I've never made a way to save data in Unity using JSONs, which is what I wanted to do so the player could easily change statistics of weapons. So, I copied some of my binary saving code, which I got from a Racky's tutorial, and implemented it to be in JSON, which I probably didn't need to do, and then made multiple save areas for the left, right, and middle gun, which is probably a bit overkill in that I made a bunch of functions for each one and saved separately. And I also made an area to save the settings menu data, which changes the volume of stuff. Now, the game was very near completion, and all I had left to do was add a few more enemies and change some of the wave spawning. So, I added one enemy, which was just an exact replica of the mouldy circle cake thing, and gave it a different sprite, and I called it the Victoria Sponge. I think it even had the same stats, except maybe slightly faster. And the other enemy was, I think I called it some blob thingy or something. I'm not completely sure, but I drew this animation just to sort of make it look like it was spawning something, which ended up being the spawning of the circle cake monster explosion thing. So to fix wave spawning, I decided to make it so if the player killed all of the enemies, it would spawn a new wave. I did this by when enemies spawned, adding them to an integer, and when they died, taking them away. The enemies, the moldy enemy spawns, don't get added to the list, but get taken away, which can result in quite a lot of issues with extreme amounts of enemy spawning. Also, just to make sure I polished the game as much as I could, I decided to change some of the really ugly world sprites, so I redrew the cake world sprites and the mouldy world sprites, and it wasn't as bad as before, I think. So, with everything done and dusted, I wrapped up the game by making a WebGL build and a normal Windows build. Unfortunately though, the WebGL build seemed to not work given it was saving data onto a computer, so that didn't work. But the normal build worked fine with the exception of some bugs. So I managed to submit the game about 3 hours before the deadline, without many noticeable bugs, apart from occasionally enemies from one world would spawn in the other, which I believe is due to there being a bit of a frame waiting between enemy spawns, but that's a lot of more technically-ish stuff. So I'd finished making a game in 5 days, which was quite a record for me, and still is as I'm recording this on the same day. So how did I do? I got the 2nd place in fun factor and 5th overall. So for a first game jam, I'm incredibly pleased, especially given there were 33 games that were submitted, and yet 187 people actually tried to make a game. So to place 2nd out of 187 people and 33 games, I'm really pleased. So yeah. Anyway, if you want to play it, the link is in the description. Hopefully more links and stuff to stuff I used is there as well. This isn't the complete story of how I made the game. There are still a lot of things that I haven't covered, such as the game's identity crisis. Well, I didn't work on it for quite a while, because I wasn't sure if I should have gone with the route I was going in, which luckily worked out after I just thought that I wouldn't have enough time to make anything else. So, yeah. There is a lot missing, but hopefully you enjoyed it regardless. Anyway, thank you for watching. I have been Gaming Tardigrade, I am Gaming Tardigrade, and I will be for at least a while longer. Good day. Very cool.